Good morning to everyone. My name is Flora Copello, and I'm part of the team of data.europa.eu, the official portal for European data that provides you with the Data Europe Academy webinars. I want to apologize in advance because my voice is not great today. I'm a bit sick, but I hope you will enjoy this session. So today's webinar aims to provide some fresh insights into the use of open data, building on the data.europa.eu discussion paper that my colleagues will share with you via the chat. This event, we like to explore how public sector information, when it's made available as open data, can be purposefully reused to create value for both public and private sectors. So we hope that by the end of this session, you will gain insights into various business models that leverage public data resources in an open data format, offering you ways to create value into public and private services. So this webinar is designed to be interactive. So throughout the session, the speakers will ask you to answer some questions using the same format as we did in the beginning. So I already see that you are familiar with this, so we will not have an issue for sure. And I would like to also thank all of you who participated in the pre-event survey that we shared with you, as the results will be used and be shown during the session and will be used as an input for the research of our today's speakers. For those who didn't have the chance to fill in the survey, no worries, the survey will be open until next week, and my colleagues will later share the link with you. So, before we move ahead, I would like to share with you the rules of today's webinar. This session, as every Data Europe Academy webinar, is being recorded, and both the recording and the presentation will be available on Data Europa Academy and will be shared with you in the upcoming few days via mail. Additionally, we would like to ask you by the end of the session to provide us with your feedback. It's very, very important for us to further enhance our content and meet your needs. And also especially for this webinar, that this is the first time we're trying this interactive approach, we would like to see if you like it and what things could change and improve. So also, as always, feel free to use the chat for any question you might have. We'll ensure that we will answer them either during the session or in the Q&A session that is taking place in the end of today's webinar. So who is with me today? Today's speakers are also the main contributors behind the relevant discussion paper. We have with us Anna Pizzamiglio. Anna is a project manager and research associate at the Lisbon Council. Previously, she worked in the private sector on digital policy issues. She holds a master's degree in European Studies from the Institute for European Studies at the Université Libre de Bruxelles, and a bachelor's degree in philosophy, international studies, and economics from Ca' Foscari University of Venice. So welcome, Anna. We have with us Enrico Ferro. Enrico is an innovation advisor, scientist, and angel investor. Over the last 20 years, his work has focused on the strategic and policy aspects of digital transformation. He currently works at Links Foundation, where he is in charge of the strategic advisory function, and over the blog, the Foundation's Web 3.0 Observatory. Dr. Ferro regularly holds courses on innovation management at an international level on behalf of the United Nations, where he is also a member of the Blockchain Expert Group. So welcome to both of you, and looking forward to your interventions. And now, moving very fast to today's agenda, we began with a brief introduction. Following this, we will have Anna, that she will have 15 minutes to provide us with more information on the results of the survey, as well as giving more information about how to leverage open data for the new business models. And then Enrico will have 15 minutes to share his insights about the business models for open data. And we will close the session with a Q&A session where it will be led by Anna, and we will collect all the answers that you might have for our speakers today. So thanks a lot to all of you. And without further ado, I give the floor to Anna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Anna Pizzamiglia, was already wonderfully introduced by Flora, and I will present to you the results of the surveys that many of you answered, not all of you, which is why we have another survey for you, which is the one that you saw at the beginning. So I'm going to start it now for all of you, and I'm going to ask you to answer it while apologies while I'm presenting, so that we can also, this will also facilitate our research work, because it will allow us to compare a bit more the answers and to have more input. Of course, if you have any questions regarding the questions, you can ask them during the dedicated Q&A session. So I'll leave this poll open for you to answer, hoping it works. Can you still vote to the poll? Is there a way for me to know? No. Okay, so I'll leave it open. It's the first time we're using a click meeting, so there's it takes a little bit of adjustment. Now you should be able to see it again. Great. And I'm in a wonderfully and weirdly sunny Belgium today, which doesn't happen very often. And taking advantage of it as much as we can. Good. I see half of you has responded to the poll. And I'm very happy to see that most of you believe that collaboration between public and private sectors is important. Many of you also have a fairly good knowledge on business models for data-driven services, which is a good result, especially for this type of activities. It's good to know that the audience has a good understanding of the topic. And many of you believe that probably the most promising business model is products and services, as well as data analytics. We'll see that a bit more in detail with Enrico later.
Do you think we can close the voting?
Yes, I was about 60% voted, so I think it's It's okay if we close it. We can share the results. Perfect. Now let's move to the presentation. I'll try to be brief and efficient. So, what are the goals of this webinar? We have five main goals, five main objectives, which is to provide you with an introduction to business models for data-driven public services, highlight and bring to the forefront the key role of open data in creating public value, highlight the importance of a business-driven approach to open data utilization, because open data in itself, it's an important tool, but we need to learn ways to make it actually relevant and profitable also. How can we do that? We do that by exploring different business models and opportunities for services based on public data resources. And then lastly, of course, we're always trying to obtain input on how data.europa.eu can support the development of this ecosystem, of an ecosystem that is sustainable and it's exploitable and that works to the benefit of everyone. To do this, for now, we carried out two activities. The first one is a discussion paper that will be presented by Enrico later. And second is this mini survey that we circulated prior to the webinar that will also be available for you until March 8th. And it's to understand what is happening in your organization. So to have a matching between theory and practice, basically. So about you, about the people who responded to the survey, we had a quite broad spectrum of people joining, of organization they belong to, with the overwhelming majority of national and regional public sector, which is relatively not surprising, I would say. And then we have another good portion, which is the private sector. Again, not really a surprising results. And then the rest follows. A good amount of people from EU institutions, a nice portion of freelancers, NGOs, and not many journalists. Now, why are we all here? Open data, because we all recognize the potential and the value and the importance of open data. Open data indeed presents a remarkable opportunity for corporations, SMEs, and startups, as well as for the public sector. That's for various reasons, because it can enhance transparency by making data available. You can enhance transparency, you can fuel innovation. By fueling innovation, in turn, you can stimulate economic growth. By having an enhanced transparency, you can empower citizens. And lastly, of course, a more data-driven approach to policymaking can enhance efficiency and effectiveness of public services. Back to the survey results. We had asked different types of questions to understand what was the perspective of respondents and participants to this webinar. An overwhelming majority of you has not ever employed any business model integrating open data into their value proposition. We had a 72% of no and a 28% of yes. On the graph on the left, you can also see that distribution based on the sector the respondents belong to. As you can see in the private sector, it's almost at the same level, whereas there is an overwhelmingly difference between in the national and regional public sector. Whereas not many of you had employed business model that effectively integrated open data, many of you had already thought about it prior to this webinar, which is a very encouraging and good sign, I would say. And lastly, on the question, has your organization ever undertaken activities to assess possible business models? Many answered yes. And the favored, not many answered no, apologies. But the one that was assessed the most was data-driven products and services, especially closely followed by data analytics. This result matches to the result that we of the survey of the poll we circulated earlier. So again, nothing really surprising. Now I'm gonna quickly give the word to Enrico Ferro, who will present the meat of this webinar. Over to you, Enrico.
Thank you, Anna. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all today, although we cannot really see each other. So my task for today is to present the study that we conducted together with Anna at the end of last year. And hopefully in the time that I have available, I will be able to give you a bird's eye view of the content of the work that we conducted. But of course, the paper is freely accessible online, and I am available for follow-up if needed after this event. The best way of to get hold of me is via LinkedIn, so you can see my LinkedIn handle on the slide if you want to take note, and I'll be happy to continue the conversation if needed after this workshop. Okay, so let's start by first of all framing the open data challenge. Okay, so over the last 30 years, we went through basically different waves of digital transformation that turned data into an essential production factor for many industries and a strategic priorities for policymakers at all levels. So we can probably say that today data is the infrastructure on which modern economy are built. And so while the potential impact for open data is huge, is significant, its reuse is still in its infancy. And why is that? Partly from, if you look at the supply side, is due to the fact that a lot of data are still not made available, or maybe are not made available with the significant required level of quality or machine readability, for example. From the demand side, instead, the problem has to do mostly with the fact that the logic of value creation that are necessary for turning what is a public good, because basically when you release data in an open format, it becomes a public good, into a sustainable venture. So the objective of the work that we conducted was exactly looking at what are the business model or the value creation mechanism that are behind the creation of a venture based on open data. Now, whenever you look at creating a new private venture, the first question you need to ask yourself is, how big is the opportunity? Is it big enough? Does it, justify the effort or going down this route? So over the last 10 years, a number of studies have been conducted by Capgemini and McKinsey. And in those studies, we learned that the open data opportunities is significant. It has been estimated between 200 and 300 plus billions in Europe alone. And also, it is we learned that the commercial appeal of data set is not distributed homogeneously. So it is important both for public entities and for private companies to understand that the possibility to generate a sustainable venture also depends greatly on the type of data that you're selecting for your venture. And finally, it's an opportunity that is cross-sectional. We know that data is cross-sectional in nature, so the opportunity is not linked to a specific domain, but is available in a number of domains. So to summarize, we could say that open data is a multi-billion and multi-dimensional opportunity, or a multi-sector opportunity. And it makes sense to explore it in order to understand whether it is possible to create a sustainable venture out of it. So in order to understand how to treat data, let's first focus on the open data value chain. Now, if we look at the open data value chain, we can see that there's a first step in the in the value chain, in which basically you mostly have public and governmental bodies operating in a monopolistic situation. So while and that is the part that is called the upstream part of the open data value chain, while the downstream part of the open data value chain is it's an ecosystem of actors that are collaborating, partly from the public sector and partly from the private sector. So we will focus mostly on the downstream part. So from when the raw data is released to when it is refined, and then it be turned into a fit for purpose product or service. What we can also learn from looking at the open data value chain is that uh, open data can actually reach the final end user or the final customer only by a collaborative effort between private and public institutions. When I say private, of course, I mean both profit and no-profit institutions. Now, moving on to the business models, first of all, we need to understand, okay, maybe for those that are not so familiar about business models, we can say that a business model, it's a value architectures that defines how value is generated, delivered, and captured by a company. And also, we can also say that a business model is an enterprise-centric view of the world. So whenever you design a business model, you look at the world from the point of view of a private entity, of the private entity that wants to generate some revenues out of the exploitation of open data. So whenever you need to design a business model that revolves around open data, you need to take what is called a resource-driven approach, meaning you start from a public resource that we said is a common good because you cannot exclude anyone from accessing it. You need to process it in order to make to combine it with enterprise specific resources so that you can also create a competitive advantage, and then you need to turn it into a value proposition that is based on open data. That means into a proposition that is aimed at solving the need of a specific market segment, so that at the end you can actually um, capture some of the value that you generated through pricing. Now, whenever you're designing an open data business model, there are three key strategic choices that you need to make. The first one is how to make sense of data. So how do you extract knowledge from this data, and what type of elaborations you're going to apply to the data? The second is how you create value out of data. That is how you turn the knowledge you created and you insert it into the value proposition, or some sort of value proposition that your company is offering to its target markets. And finally, how do you make money out of data? So how you monetize this type of value proposition that you're offering to the market. So these are three important strategic choices that needs to be made whenever designing a resource-based business model that is dealing with open data. Now, let's see what are the options that you have available. This is, if you wish, a business model menu, from which you have a list of options for the three choices that I've just described. So whenever you need to do data elaboration, you can choose whether you want to aggregate data, you want to structure and classify data, you want to georeference them, or do some validation, maybe use them for training or some specific AI algorithms, and so on. So there are a number of options from which you can choose. Moving on to uh, turning the knowledge you generate out of the data into value propositions, you need to understand to what extent you want open data to be at the core of your product or service. So you can have a situation in which open data, if you want, is a marginal ingredient of your product or service, or a situation in which you heavily rely on open data, and as a consequence, open data becomes a key ingredient of your product or services. Or maybe open data becomes your bread and butter, and it may become the actual final good that you are selling to your customers. So once you've made those decisions, then it's time to decide, how am I going to monetize, the value proposition that I'm going to deliver. And also here you have a number of options. First of all, you can have a premium options that are either adopt an a la carte type of pricing, or you can have subscription fees, or you can have even royalties if you can generate something that produces royalties, or you may have a freemium in which you have basically a part of the service that is free but is either feature limited, time limited, or size limited, for example for dataset. Or you may even consider offering the service for free. And in that case, maybe you may look for some advertising to cover the cost, or you conduct some cross subsidization within the organizations because you believe that providing this free service can become maybe a new way for customer acquisition. Or you maybe just provide the service for free because you have zero marginal cost, because we know that the economics of information are very favorable and generating the additional cost sometimes is zero. So you maybe monetize a certain amount of products, and the rest can be given away for free. So by making these three strategic decisions, by combining the different options that I presented in the literature, we managed to identify 14 business models that have been identified and clustered into 5 categories. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the time to go in depth into all the 14 business models because we don't have enough time. But as I said, they are described at length in the paper, so you can access the paper. There is also a link here in the footer of every slide. Let me just say that basically, when we look at the categories of the business models, some of them are focused more on the pricing, describing the pricing. So whether you have a freemium or a premium model in which you have different options as well here also in terms of business models. Some others are more focused on the type of benefits you get. So whether you get a cost saving or you get an indirect benefit for your main product or service, or you decide or how you access the market with a razor and blade type of approach. Now, the key issue is, okay, maybe we can create a product, but how do we make it financially sustainable? And we know that financial sustainability has to do um, with competitive advantage. So the question now is, what is the source of competitive advantage that we can leverage when we actually start from a common good that is open data? So first of all, we can say that the sources of competitive advantage may vary depending also to how the data is released, because we often say open data, but sometimes data are released in different levels of openness. So whether if you have a higher price barriers, for example, then of course financial strength can be a source of competitive advantage. But as the extent of financial price barriers and technological barriers, that is basically where open data is fully released in a free and open format, decrease, basically we can see that most of the competitive advantage come from either functional algorithms that are basically resource specific resources, company specific resources, or for example specific domain. When I say company specific resources, I mean either skills or relationships or other data that are only in the hands of the company. Also, new emerging technologies can become a source of competitive advantage. For example, you can use AI to train more, to train to extract knowledge faster from data, or you can use blockchain to exploit new monetization alternatives, or even to explore data provenance certifications so that you can provide a higher quality data than your competitors. So there are many different ways in which you can build a competitive advantage. Moving on to new and emerging technologies, and namely AI and blockchain, we can see that I think they can play an important role in fostering new vibrant open data ecosystems. If we look at how the company mostly focusing on AI are approaching the data and the algorithm space in terms of business model, we can see that there's either a mix. Basically, AI is a mix of data and algorithms, and either data and algorithms can be open or closed. Right now, the dominant approach is to have an open algorithms and closed data, because in that way you can actually create some sort of a moat or a barrier around your company to protect your profitability. Nevertheless, I think it's important, especially for policymakers, to understand that data oligopolies can turn into algorithmic oligopolies. So in a way, it is important to make sure that, especially when we are talking about user data, the ownership of the data remains in the hands of the user and does not become part of the property of a big conglomerate that is part of an oligopoly. Then when we move to blockchain, I think, and it comes to data, I think it's important to also mention that sometimes data are not released because of conflicts between alternative values, like, for example, accessibility and privacy. Now, with data and a suite of technologies that can be labeled as privacy preserving technologies, this trade-off may be broken, and so this could also allow to not necessarily release the data, but be able to release the knowledge that is resident within the data, and in a way that is privacy preserving. I'm almost done. So
No worries, no worries. You have still 5 minutes, Enrico. Take your
okay,
time.
no, I saw you appearing, so I thought I ran out of time. Just 2 more slides, and then I will stop. So up to now, we mostly focused, on a perspective that represents private entities. But as we said at the beginning, to really build flourishing open data ecosystems, a collaboration with the public sector it is required. So I think one of the things that emerged from our analysis of the literature is also a need for a paradigm shift in the way public sector manages and looks at open data. So the shift is basically is from seeing it as a legal obligation into a more operational necessity, from an outward orientation, meaning, okay, we release data for somebody else, to an inward orientation, because also the public sector can learn and can improve by having a better access to data that sometimes we know are locked into silos and not really accessible across the different agencies in the public sector. From seeing it as a cost, to see it as an opportunity to improve their processes, and from seeing it as a clerical function to a strategic function, because we all know that data is essential for decision making, and decision making can be strategic at times. So finally, I think it's, to conclude, we can say that open data can be a significant force for good. It requires a collaborative effort between the public and the private sector in order to harness the potential. So we need to have the public sector that sees it as a strategic opportunity for itself and for society, and we need to have the private sector that fully understand what are the mechanics of value creation for building sustainable ventures. And I think emerging technologies can be an opportunity to building a more secure and larger and a more automated data economy. And finally, I think it's important, as I said, to have some sort of a paradigm shift in which we move from the idea of liberating data from silos to make them open by design, to be born open by design. So with that, I think I exhausted my time, and I hope I was clear enough to present all the content.
Thank you so much, Enrico, and thank you, Anna. I think it was a very, very interesting and insightful presentation, and we already have received quite a lot of questions. So now I will just change in this A view so all the audience can see us, and I will give the floor to Anna, that she will be the one facilitating this Q&A session.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed Enrico's presentation. So let's start with the first question. Rolf Chung asked you if you could maybe give a case study of I'm guessing of a successful implementation of a business model for open data in the public sector. Please correct me in the chat if I'm wrong.
Yes, there are, for example, the companies that help um, public sector entities to make data available, because sometimes public sector don't have the technical skills, and they so they become some sort of a platform that basically is paid from the public sector to make data available and offers data for free. Or sometimes there's the other way around. Sometimes they get paid by the people that want to use data, and they just collect data from public administrations for free. Another example could be open corporates. Open corporates basically brings together all the data about the company's balance sheets worldwide, and it make it freely available online. So it's a kind of an open source type of business model, in which basically they say, okay, if you want, the data is there, but of course, knowing the data, extracting knowledge from the data is time consuming. If you don't, if for example you're a journalist and you want to write a piece on a specific aspect, we already have done some analysis on the data, and we can provide you the knowledge in a much faster and cheaper way than you could do it by yourself. So those are, for example, two interesting models. Another, yeah, I think that those are, I think, yeah, is enough. Maybe we can leave space for another question.
We have another interesting question by Mate Vinkce. Apologies if I misspell any names or surname. And they ask, so quite often digital products are offered without monetary compensation, and they're offered in the hope of monetizing the customer base later somehow, maybe via a large established enterprise to which the startup is sold. I guess maybe a specific case of cross subsidization, meaning expected intertemporal cross subsidization.
Okay. uh, all right. I'm not sure whether I have a name out of my on the top of my head of that, but yeah, I can see that sometimes, you know especially when you talk about startups that want to be sold. Startups that what we sold basically pay their customer acquisition with VC money. Okay, so their sustainability is, if you wish, subsidized by VCs, because they know that once they reach a specific scales in terms of customer base, they become attractive to potential incumbent, and then they can be bought. So in that case, that is uh, 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 um, it's an example of cross subsidization, but is not an example of a company that, for example, already has a product that is working, and is using it as a new way for acquiring new companies. I think that is an example of cross subsidization, in which basically the source of funds that is coming from the cross subsidization is not coming from a product that the company is selling, but is coming from VC. So in a way, the product that will be sold is the actual company, is not even the product.
Amazing. Thank you, Enrico. On to the next question. This was not a question, it was more of a comment, and I would be curious to see your reaction to it, Enrico. And the comment was that for regional public bodies, the goals are more often to make the data available for the new services to the inhabitants, to the citizens, rather than selling. Which I guess it's a very valid comment, and it's also very true. But there is still, in my humble opinion, there's also still a need to create some monetary value, not just public value, to make these services self-sustainable. Enrico, what's your
Yeah, it's definitely true. That why I at the beginning I said, when you look at business model, you look at it from the corporate perspective. Look at it from the business from the public organization perspective. Nevertheless, we should remember that public administrations take a cut of the profit of the companies through taxes. So uh, it's in the interest of the public administrations to release data in sufficient quality so that it can be turned into a profitable venture. Because think about it from a company. Okay, let's say I am a company and I want to take a risk. I'm going to take the risk of uh, re- um, relying a little bit on you releasing data. Now, if you change your mind, or if you say, okay, tomorrow I will stop releasing this data, for me that is a problem. Okay, so it is true that the public administration may not need to release data in a super accessible, machine readable way. So that could create an opportunity for a private actor to fill that gap. But on the other hand, it is true that that private actors are relying on public administrations uh, in terms of consistencies in the release of data. Because if you say, okay, I release data for 6 months, then I change the data, then I release some other data, it's impossible to build something on such a changing environment. So I agree on the fact that maybe public administrations don't necessarily have to release data in a very machine readable way, and that can become an opportunity for a private player. But it is important that public administrations understand, if we want any type of economic activity to be based on the release of data, they need to guarantee some sort of consistency and durability. Otherwise, it makes no sense for a private entity to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Talking about monetization and exploitability of open data, there's another interesting question, which is, do you think products developed from open data that generate do you think products developed from open data that generate value for any entity should be capitalized in the balance sheet of the entity to ensure the value is captured?
Can you read it again, please?
Yes, of course. So basically, what they're asking is if the products developed from open data that are actually generating some revenue should be capitalized in the balance sheet of an entity to make sure that the value, to have a way to measure the value
Mm-hmm.
that they brought to the entity.
Mm. I'm not sure. I mean, I think in the balance. I would say no, but I don't know. I'm don't take me too serious on this because usually what you put in your P&L, you put your revenues, and so I'm not sure why you think it depends what the product is. I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Sorry.
Maybe they could provide some more context in the chat to make sure that we answer this question properly and fully, if possible, of course. Another really interesting question I found is that if it's a question on whether open data necessarily means free data. They're asking from the point of view of the entity that is generating the data. There is a further question, which is it does require an investment to generate the data. Then how do we ensure the return of the investment? And also, is it possible to retain the data to maintain a competitive advantage in case of a partnership with the private sector? Is it possible to retain the data before making it open? Or even to control who has access to this open, which in this case is not fully open in my understanding, data? Maybe we can start with the first question and then I'll follow up with the others, but to give you a general understanding of the.
Yeah, I mean, of course, data can be released in different degrees of openness and accessibility. Okay, I think that there are some laws that require public administrations to release certain data in fully open format. As for what concerns the cost, I think that the cost again, it is a real aspect. It is important to be considered, but also I think it's a perspective that kind of presumes that there is no value for the public administration, for the public sector in general. So for example, if you are a public agency and you need to incur a cost to release a data set, okay, for you that is a cost, but maybe there is another agency on the other, on the other, somewhere else in your country, that is benefiting from that data. So the question is, do we want, so I think that the need, the perspective change that I was mentioning is to see not necessarily releasing open data as an outward type of action, but as an inward type of action, meaning it is in the interest of the public administrations to share data among themselves and with the private sector in order to actually improve themselves, to create some efficiencies. So releasing the data can generate can create a cost, but can also generate some efficiencies, and the efficiencies maybe can compensate the cost. Now the question is whether the the cost, who is the, on whose balance sheet is the cost. Okay, because of course you could say, okay, I'm a municipality, I need to incur the cost, and it's not so clear where the benefit is coming from. Maybe the benefit is coming from another municipality releasing their data and allowing you to learn something from them and improving your efficiency. So this is of course not a deterministic type of process, but I think it is important, and that is the type of shift I was mentioning, that we move away from just releasing open data as a compliance aspect or something we need to do for somebody else, and start looking at releasing data as something we do for ourselves. Maybe not because, of course we already have access to our data, so for us it's an additional cost. But if everyone starts reasoning in this way, we will start having positive inflows of value from other entities without actually having to incurring the cost. So in that way, we don't optimize only at balance sheet level, but we optimize at ecosystem level.
Okay, thank you very much. Always linked, there's a similar question in a sense, a little less specific, if you will. That is, it clearly comes from a public sector, in my understanding. And they say that there are key open data initiatives that are needed, but the assumption is it should it be available for free or paid for by the government? This is a big issue that they're facing, and they're asking how is it possible to overcome these issues when the government defunds many of the third sector organizations responsible for these initiatives.
Hmm. Yes. Um,
We're having some very difficult questions today.
yeah. I mean, of course, there is not a simple answer to this aspect, because as soon as you charge, then it's no longer open data. But anyway, maybe what you can do, you can uh, you can have uh, licenses that for example, do not allow commercial exploitation of data, and you can have dual licenses. Okay, so depending of the type of use you make, you can either access it for free or being charged for a margin, a fee that covers the marginal cost of generating the data. Because at the end of the day, the data generation is covered by, is part of the daily activities of the public agency. So the cost that you are incurring is the additional cost of making it available. Now the question is also, maybe the answer to this question, probably, now that I think about it a bit longer, is not so much about focusing on the cost of making it available, but rather on innovating the process that generates the data so that it's, kind of machine readable and available by default when it is generated, so that there is no any added cost. So maybe the problem we are facing now is probably due to the fact that we do not we have not fully completed the the process of digitalization and innovation of the activities that are actually generating the data. Because if we actually, went full digital and, innovated the processes of data generation, in that case the marginal cost of making them available for free would be next to zero, probably. So probably the tension that we are facing right now is due to an incomplete process of innovating the data generation activities in terms of digital outputs, I would say.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I see here in the chat that we have a comment from Federica Welle Donker. Again, apologies if I'm misspelling the names of people. And I think it's an interesting comment. So, as a little bit of background, Federica was, we had her at last year's webinar, and she's assistant professor at the Knowledge Center for Open Data of Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. And she comments that there is a flaw in the taxation rationale. First, point number one is that international companies do not pay taxes in the country where they harvest the open data. And the second point is that local governments do not benefit from value-added taxes collected into general revenue. What is your take on this, Enrico?
Yeah, I mean, the first point, they're all valid points. The first point, I think, we need to solve the issue at EU level. I mean, this is something clear. I mean, there are many companies that don't pay taxes in countries just because we have tax havens in Europe. So that's a known issue, and we need to face it as if you want, to have any chance of going any further with EU. The second aspect, I think, it has to do with where are you optimizing for? Are you optimizing for your balance sheet as an agency, or are you optimizing as a nation, or are you optimizing, so I think if the agencies can prove that their data are used by private entities, then they need to, to argue for some transfer charges with central governments, for example. So I think, that is a matter of scope in terms of optimization. So I think I understand the tension, as I said, that local agencies are facing. At the same time, I'm not sure whether optimizing for a single budget is the way forward.
Okay, thank you. And since we're approaching the end of this webinar, I have just one last question from the audience, that it's on AI and open algorithms. So the question is, the person is puzzled by the idea of having the dominant approach in AI being open algorithms. And the comment that follows is that this doesn't seem up to date with the latest advancements in Gen AI. So how do you see this shift that I mean mostly happened through OpenAI? I think we can all agree on that. And we've actually seen a bit this shift from open algorithms and open source codes to a more closed and profit related approach, more on research and more on money and the privatization of this type of algorithms.
Well, I mean, I think it's when you in the battle of open versus closed, open will always win. I mean, look at the market. I mean, although Apple is very, very successful as a company, look at the market shares of mobile phones systems. I think it's very profitable, and it's and can be sustained over time. But I believe in the long term, and of course I agree with the fact that right now maybe that there is some dominant player that is adopting a closed approach. But if you look at what is happening, for example, for Facebook, now Facebook decided to open it. There are also other initiatives, like, for example, Singularity Net, that is designing ecosystem of AIs that are going to be open. And I think for the benefit of society and the scrutiny of policymakers, I think the openness will come. This is my conviction. I mean, it's not necessarily true, or I'm not saying that it is, fully implemented now, but I believe that over time this will happen.
Thank you very much. I think we can close the Q&A. I saw one question, and I think you can have the last question we had on measuring the impact. There is a webinar on the data.europa.eu YouTube channel that the Lisbon Council, together with DOP held and Capgemini held last year, and you can find some interesting answers there. It will be shared in the chat soon.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you so much, Enrico, for this for today's webinar, today's discussion. We received so many good questions also from our audience. So I want to thank everyone involved. In the meantime, please provide your feedback. You can scan the QR code. Previously, I saw that we also shared on top of the screen a direct link. We will very much appreciate it, especially because today we tried a different approach. And as I saw, there were a lot of questions related to data.europa.eu. And as you know, we are very, very busy here in data.europa.eu, and especially this March. For those who are not aware, tomorrow is the Open Data Day. It's a global annual celebration of open data organized by the Open Knowledge Network. And to celebrate this special event, next Friday, at the same time, at 10 o'clock, we will have a session where you can have a deep dive on data.europa.eu and ask all the questions that you're curious about open data. So we're waiting for you next week. And stay tuned, because we have more webinars taking place on data spaces, data governance, and we're looking forward to see you there. So thanks once again. Thanks to our speakers. Thanks to you for all the questions. And yeah, see you next week. Thank you.